Hi friends, and I'm Rudolph here, author of a couple books including Meadowvale, Michael the Traveler, and a few collections of poetry and other small work. And I have a comment here from a group on Facebook. It's anonymous, and the wording is general enough that it's not going to implicate anybody. But I wanted to answer one of these questions because I think there are a lot of authors out there who have these concerns. The person wrote, "Hello all. I am reaching out for some writing support. Now, I'm not saying that I'm giving up on my story because I'm not going to do that. I'm just stuck. I've always struggled with outlining, and I'm not sure how to gather my thoughts for my story. I've tried note files, and that seems to help slightly, but I'm looking for a more effective way to write my romance. Any advice?" So, depending on where you are in the stage of writing your book, an outline could be varying levels of useful. If you're starting, this is page 1, you haven't tacked a word down yet, don't worry about an outline. You need to enter into your book, give yourself the freedom, give yourself the gentleness to explore. And if you're near the end of your book, it's probably too late. You have your manuscript, and now either it needs simply to be edited, which is its own, I say simply, not easy, but simply to be edited, or some drastic rewrites depending on how much you want to modify the story. But an outline usually takes place as you begin writing the story. For most of my work, I've published 2 books, and I'm currently writing a third, and the outline, because I've never really sat down and said, here are the pieces that all need to happen, I create these thin outlines as I'm going. The first couple of 1,000 words is just me going for it. I'll start with some vision of what I want to see happen for my current book, when I'm writing at the moment, a work in progress. I had just this vision based on a couple miscellaneous experiences. I was playing Borderlands 3. It's a cool game, and one of the characters, when you activate her special skill, she summons this big warrior robot mech suit thing and blasts all the bad guys away. That was one layer in my heart. Another layer was a sketch, just this random exercise I had written some years ago about a woman who swept off into a space battle against some alien ships. That was 2 layers. And then I've just had these general feelings about dystopian settings or post-apocalyptic settings, and I wanted to write something about those. There were a couple other layers, but all of those packed together, I envisioned this scene where a woman, kind of down on her luck, would discover some alien exosuit. She would strap it on, or it would meld with her, whatever, kind of Iron Man style, and then she would go blast through all her problems. That was just the pinhole vision I had for this particular story. And I figured that would be somewhere near the middle of this thing. This isn't an outline yet. This is just a big flashy scene that I had envisioned. So I started at the beginning of the story. I thought to myself, here's my vision, this big explosive mech suit she's going to discover. How do I get there? So I scrolled back in my imagination and I said, here's the main character. Here's the sort of dystopian setting. Here's her job. Here's some of her quirks. Here's her brother. Here's her sad backstory that we don't really explore just yet. And then I built up, fleshing out her surroundings, fleshing out her personality. And that, again, was not an outline. That was just me saying, here's this big flash explosion point I want to reach. How do I get there? Let me start with, oh my goodness, who even is this main character? Let me honestly grow comfortable with her, writing about her. And then as that established itself, I was able to start imagining the world around her. That was when the potential for outline started sparkling up. Even then, it was mostly just thoughts and feelings kind of percolating inside my head. And it was a couple more chapters, bunches of pages before I said, okay, now let me outline some things like general timeline. In the story, her father died before we meet her in the story. I knew that somewhere in my brain, but now, honestly, I'm over halfway through the manuscript, and I'd say I only finally just wrote down a bare bones timeline. When her mother disappeared, when her father died, when she joined the military, when she was discharged, things like that. That's just one of the outline pieces. The emphasis I'm trying to make is I'm already well over halfway through the first draft of my manuscript, and only now have I begun creating outlines in earnest. Of course, there's the responsibility as you're writing of creating outlines in your guts. What does that look like? It looks like making internal sense for your world. Depending on what kind of setting you have, there are different weights, different heavinesses of the responsibility. My current manuscript, my current work in progress is sci-fi, set in the distant future. So there's a lot of freedom there. But as with any story, regardless of the amount of fiction you pack in it, it requires some internal sense. So I will jot notes every now and then about how the military structure works. So the main character was in the Space Force, and I copied the Air Force's officer structure. I think I made one tiny modification, but that's almost like an outline. Another thing is sometimes I'll come up with fake terms for cybernetic parts, and I have this little chart of here are like the polite terms that polite people use in conversation, and here are the colloquial terms that most people use, and here are the kind of inappropriate terms or the gritty terms that only mechanics who have foul mouths would use. Like one of the things that I love is the concept of a sprig. So in normal English, a sprig is a plant, a little bit of a plant that's just begun growing. But I've imagined in the story, sprig is kind of an offensive term used to refer to cybernetic limbs. Why is that? I'm not even sure why that is, but it just felt like a good way to make the story that much more real. Little flares without much explanation that gave it flavor. So that's another small thing I outlined is terms in the world, and there are terms for eyes and terms for mechanical limbs, a couple other things like that in that small category. So outlining can be a useful tool, and especially if you're halfway through your book, start to get a sense of what is consistent. There's so many layers you can address, layers like random terminology or timeline, or if you have created a military structure or some kind of academic structure or a political structure, you want to be consistent with that. Those are the things where it's less of an outline and honestly more of a chart. But depending on your priorities, don't worry about outlining until you're about halfway through. And then outlining should just be a response to the things you've started to imagine, the structures or the orders that you've already begun imagining, and you just need to write them down so that you don't forget the correct order. Again, here another random example, and you could use this kind of concept either directly or modified a little bit. But in martial arts, they have colored belts that indicate rank. The white belt is the lowest, and then there's the yellow belt, and then I forget the rest. But that would be a kind of outline you could use, whether it's belts for karate rank specifically, or some kind of scaling structure in your story. Therefore, most of the answers to say, don't worry about it. But if you are determined to have outlines, I would say the second best. Let's go the second best first. The second best option I would recommend is Google Drive. It's free. It saves every 3 seconds or so, and you have infinite space for normal type documents. By normal type documents, I mean Word documents. I have folders upon folders upon folders of different things that I've tried to organize, and I have a folder for the books on which I'm working, and then Each book has its own folder, and inside of those, sometimes there are folders for these kinds of structures like, again, military outlines, or sometimes I'll do miniature maps. I do a lot of small family trees to try and keep track of all the characters. So that's the second best option, Google Drive, and you just make sure you put all of your pieces in the correct file, which is in the correct folder, which is in the correct, upper level folder. It takes work getting used to that kind of organization, but once you have a system, it will work wonders. Another great resource, this is the thing that I use now for all of my work, is this program called Scrivener. The website is literatureandlatte.com. You look up Scrivener, you'll find it. It'll send you there. This is whatever. I wasn't trying to advertise this software, but it's like $60 to purchase, like one-time purchase. It's not a monthly thing. And then you have this great software that is basically a Google Drive unto itself. However, it focuses more on literature, and it lets you have a cascaded file system. It takes a butt ton of energy to understand how you can use all of the tools packed inside this thing. I know like maybe 1% of its power, and I'm already overwhelmed. But after putting in that energy, after putting in that patience, I've been able to use a lot of these tools to my advantage, and now I have a lot of organizational systems in place. I mean, one of my favorites that has the most subordinate folders is my Dungeons and Dragons campaign. So many layers. There are towns, and then all those towns have their own shops and characters and quests that you can discover. And then there's like all of the NPCs and the main locations and the main items and the ancestral equipment. Crazy ideas, but I love Scrivener because it lets me organize all these things with all of these little different identifying markers, from the little icon that's on the item itself to various kinds of tags to various kinds of structuring options. But all that to say, don't outline until you're about halfway through, and then you already have a sense of what you need to outline, and it's just a matter of writing it down so you don't forget whatever order you were imagining in your guts.